gather around. As you can see, the place is very crowded because of all the renovations they're doing here. This is a good place to start. Okay, and so a few moments ago, I said a few words about the early years of Caesarea. It's a major Roman port city. It was built by Herod the Great. By the way, it wasn't the Romans who built the city, but Herod the Great. He was a local Jewish king. Of course, he was a client king. In other words, he would answer to the emperor in Rome. But the emperors had a way of extracting money from the local people, not providing money to the people that were under them. Definitely, this was a massive project that was all orchestrated by a very powerful king called Herod. Now, this is a typical theater, a Roman theater, and one of the biggest misconceptions out there is that people oftentimes will refer to this as an amphitheater. What is the difference between this and an amphitheater?
More round.
An amphitheater is an oval-shaped arena, okay, surrounded on every side by a tall wall for good reason. That's where the blood games took place. Wild beasts, gladiators like the Colosseum in Rome. That's an amphitheater. This, by definition, is a Roman theater. Oh, half a circle. Okay? You see the half circle down there called the orchestra in Latin. This is where the orchestra sat. You can see the rows of seats. By the way, in this place had room for approximately 35 to 100 to 4,000 spectators, and this was the stage. Now, there's one thing that is missing here, and that's the backstage building. See the ruins of that building? So initially it was all closed on every side, but you would never expect to find gladiators fighting to the death in this type of a setting, okay? Instead, you would expect to find actors putting a mask on. By the way, what are they called in Greek? Hypocrites, exactly. The word hypocrite is basically the word for those actors acting out, putting on a mask, okay? Either a smiling mask or a sad mask, okay? Depending on whether it was a tragedy or a comedy, and also musicals and public speaking. It was in this type of a setting that the Apostle Paul later on gave his famous testimony before Felix Festus and King Agrippa, also here in Caesarea. So, biblically speaking, although there's absolutely no record as to Jesus ever traveling through this area, it is mentioned time and time again throughout the book of Acts. Okay? What happens in the book of Acts? It's already the aftermath. Okay? Jesus triumphed over death and the devil, the powers, the forces of the devil. He returns to heaven, right? Leading his disciples to make new disciples. And this is the time when the word of the Lord is now passed from the Jewish followers of Christ over to the Gentiles. And for me personally, above all, this place represents the gateway through which the word, the gospel, was passed on to you guys. The fact that you're standing here on this stage 2,000 years later is a great testimony to the power of the gospel. Okay? Now, one person was very, very instrumental in that, okay, was the Apostle Paul. We're going to talk about him in a minute. But I think just as a whole, okay, and especially for those of you who are taking notes, one thing that will help you remember this place in the future is what I call the 4 P's, as in the letter P. And those 4 P's will stand for Peter, Paul, Philip the evangelist, and finally Pilate. Okay? Peter, Paul, Philip, and Pilate. Let's start off with Peter. Acts chapter 10. Okay? Peter is in a place called Joppa, which is about 35 miles that way. Okay? A Jewish port city. At the same time, what's that? Are we going to jump? Oh,
Are we going? No, I'm not. We got to go.
We're not going to no, we're not going to jump, and we're not going to jump. So, Acts chapter 10 opens with a story, okay, about a centurion, a non-commissioned officer in the Roman military. You would probably call him, a company commander, okay, charge over something like 80 to 100 soldiers. And he's stationed here in Caesarea. Okay, why? Because this is the green zone, so to speak, in Judea for the Romans. Okay, so this is where someone like Cornelius would have felt right at home. Okay, very safe. He lives here with his family, but there's something very unique about that centurion. Okay, unlike most of the other Romans that were here, who had nothing but disgust, for Judaism, they couldn't understand this weird, religion. He was someone who was actually following and believing in Jehovah, the true God of Israel. And he was assisting the local people here, right? The local Jewish community, giving them offerings and alms and all kinds of things. And as we're told, his charity and generosity and his righteousness ascended up to heaven, okay? The beautiful aroma. This is what God desires, by the way, okay? And he is sending an angel down to Cornelius, okay? The angel tells him about this Peter, who's staying at Joppa, at a place called the house of Simon the Tanner, okay? His house is by the sea. And he instructs him to send some men down to Joppa to get him over to Caesarea. Now, before that can happen, remember, again, the context. Okay? Pagan city, Jewish city down there. Something has to happen to Peter first. As the men are on their way to Joppa, Peter is hungry. It's 12 o'clock, 6th hour, goes up to the rooftop, and he falls into a trance. And what does he see in his vision?
A sheet with
food.
Yeah.
With what?
Unclean food.
Different types of food. Okay, what do you mean by clean or unclean?
Not kosher.
Exactly. It's not that they're not properly washed. Okay? It's different types of foods. Some are clean or permissible for Jews, and others that are not. Do you know that there's a whole list of things that Jews are not allowed to eat? You know that Jews are not allowed to eat shrimps?
Yes.
Yeah.
Shells, oysters,
Their bottom.
good stuff. They're not allowed to eat that. Pork, of course, and other things. And by the way, even the manner by which the animal is slaughtered. Okay. Today, the rabbis would even argue that you need to separate dairy from meat. You're not allowed to mix them, and that's why at breakfast you'll never find sausages. You notice? It's all dairy. And then dinner, all meat.
Yeah.
Okay, even the desserts, no dairy. It's all substitutes, okay? So, very, very strict regulations. Now, bear in mind, the earliest followers of Christ were very devout Jews. It's something that we oftentimes forget, okay? Just like these people that we see around, okay? They followed commandments and the regulations and everything, sometimes in a very strict manner. And so, a voice, okay, is heard from the heavens telling Peter, get up and eat indiscriminately. What is the natural response? By no means, Lord.
Yeah.
Okay? Somebody said that this combination is impossible, right? By no means, Lord. Don't say no to God. Third time, okay? This happens 3 times, something about 3 times in Peter, right? Take some time, for the message to kick in. And he realizes that it's not about the food here. It's really to do with the symbolism, okay, what this food comes to symbolize. Okay, the kosher food symbolizes the Jewish people, the unclean food, the Gentiles. And what God is essentially telling him is that the time has come, okay, for the word, the message, the gospel, to be passed on from the Jews to the Gentiles. This is huge. Oftentimes people will talk about the grafted in. This is it. Grafting in. Okay, the Gentiles into the house of Israel. Notice, it's not the other way around. Okay, when a Jewish person discovers Jesus, it's not that he's not converting to the church. It's the other way around. He's actually discovering his roots, what Judaism really is supposed to be. Okay? True faith is supposed to be. And so now, with this new realization, he accompanies the servants back to this place, and Cornelius and his entire household, not just Cornelius, are amongst the very first converts, the very first grafted in, okay, among the Gentiles. And that's why I think that this place, above all, represents the gateway through which the gospel was passed on, essentially from a small Jewish community over to the Gentiles. So this is Peter. Next, let's talk about Paul. The Apostle Paul, someone who is a lawyer of the Jewish law, a scholar, scribe, Pharisee, right? As Paul testifies, the biggest and worst of the Pharisees, right? A great persecutor of the early church. We you remember what happened to him along the road to Damascus, and a change, 180 degrees. Now he's actually carrying the torch, okay, over to the Gentiles, right? And so following his third mission trip, he returns to the land knowing that he will encounter trouble for sure. He goes to Jerusalem, which is the hub of Judaism at the time, even today. And sure enough, there's an attempt for his life. You remember, they tried to lynch him on the street there. And when the Roman soldiers found out that he was a Roman citizen, they rescued him into the stronghold in Jerusalem. Now still, you remember that there was a very large group of people, men, Jewish men, who took a vow not to eat or drink before they would see him dead. You see that? You remember that?
Yeah.
So the Romans knew that it wasn't very safe for him to be there, even in the stronghold. And therefore, concerned for his life, they decided to move him from Jerusalem to this place. Why Caesarea by the Sea? Because this is, for the Romans, their hub. Okay? Later on became the provincial capital for the Romans. So although Jerusalem still remained very important for the Jews, for the Romans, this is it. This is the green zone. This is the most important headquarters, Roman headquarters in the land. And so we're told that that Paul spends 2 years, okay, in imprisonment here in Caesarea. And so I'm going to show you to the place where we believe that he was held, okay, under house arrest. He had obviously privileges as a Roman citizen. One of them was to appeal before Caesar and send his appeal. And he waited here all that time. By the way, do you remember why he waited for such a long time? You know, the Roman governors were very corrupt. Right? And oftentimes they used their position to enrich themselves. And so the governor here hoped that he would pay a bribe, to get away from it. Of course, no bribe came, and therefore he stayed for a long time. But during that time, he used that opportunity to speak out, okay, before the rulers of the land, Festus, Felix, and Agrippa. Okay, so Acts chapters 24 through 26 describes, okay, how Paul is brought into an auditorium, which would be essentially the central part of the stage, maybe even this one over here, in chains. They're all sitting there, probably mocking him. I mean, it's the best show in town, so to speak. And they essentially say, speak out, right? Speak out. They're probably hoping that they would try to sugarcoat the message, trying to, sound nice, so they would release him. But instead, they got something totally different. It scared the heck out of them, especially Agrippa, who was raised Jewish, right? He knew about the prophets and everything else. And you remember that he sarcastically said, are you trying to convert us to, that faith, in such a short time? And what was Paul's reply? I wish I could, everyone, except for these chains. This is such a wonderful testimony, just to see proper conduct. He didn't feel sorry for himself. He didn't grunge or, he was focused 100%, his ultimate goal, which was the ultimate prize. And we're going to talk about that in a minute when we get close to the arena. Okay, we'll talk about the time that Paul spent here during his imprisonment. So the Apostle Paul, and of course it was from here that Paul made his final journey to Rome, and according to the tradition, he was forgiven everything that he had for himself. Third P, Philip, the evangelist. Okay? The same Philip who baptized the Ethiopian eunuch, okay? Not far from Jerusalem. He and his daughters were godly, were prophesying, very instrumental in creating this major Christian center that lasted for centuries and centuries. Did you know that by the 4th century there was a bishop here in Caesarea, which was just as important as the bishop of Alexandria and Rome, what we call today the Pope. Okay, this was a major Christian center, very much thanks to people like Philip the Evangelist, one of the earliest 7 deacons of the church. Finally, we get to Pontius Pilate. Okay, let's pause here, and we're going to continue and talk more about that individual when we get to the palace on the water